Good evening and welcome to Voice of Africa Radio. It's 9 minutes after 7 o'clock. Today, the 23rd of February 2013. I have in the studio former MP for Liberal Democrat Lembit Opik, Elizabeth The Rock Jones, parliamentary candidate for UKIP Dartford, and also Deputy Chairwoman in the studio with me to do discussion on important issue. I have Mahmoud, Fiaz, Liberal Democrat, Leighton and Wanstead also in the studio to do discussion with me. As a matter of fact, important issue that really matter most. The non-stand slaughter of animals, and the animal rights campaigners are also saying that all meat animals should be stunned before slaughtering. And that is talking about the halal and the kosher meat. But a Jewish organization has criticized the BVA that they are funding, or what they are doing is out of hypocrisy. If anything at all, CCTVs and pictures should be examined at abattoirs to find out what is going on. We'll also be discussing very topical issues in the matter of fact in Libya. What is going on today in Libya? ISIL or no ISIL? Is it the ISIL from Iraq and Syria, or a group of people that had the opportunity to have weapons and are causing mayhem in the north of Africa? Is the video genuine or fake? This and more, stay tuned to Voice of Africa Radio. And the votes, the moral right, is it moral, or we should be voting as Church of England has urged its members to vote come the 7th of May, saying that they are not as sexy as Russell Brand, telling people not to vote, but they are urging their members to vote. Stay tuned and don't go away. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me this evening.
Always a pleasure, sir. Always a pleasure.
On Voice of Africa Radio. To start with, let's look at the non-stand animal, killing of animal in the United Kingdom. Today, there has been already two discussions in the House of Laws in regards to slaughtering of animals. Some saying that the stunning of animal before is being killed in the United Kingdom is most acceptable by the majority of people living in England. And the Jewish community and the Muslim community are saying that this is targeting the halal and the kosher meat. Therefore, they urge those who are the animal rights campaigners that their way is the best way to get animal slaughtered, because they use a surgical blade, which of course is less painful than giving a stunned animal with electric shock or fire, whatever it is, to put the animal to pressure, to lower the blood pressure before the animal is slaughtered. So they think that what the BVA and some animal campaigners are doing is out of hypocrisy. Elizabeth, your party is of the view that when your manifesto would have a stringent and the most a tougher way of dealing with this kind of halal and kosher meat, because you are going to have an outright measures on how animals should be slaughtered in this country. Why do your party want to come out with a manifesto that is going to be a straitjacket on majority or some of the people living in the United Kingdom?
Oh, well, good evening, Adam. UKIP is concerned about animal welfare. In fact, a platform UKIP policy is to ban the exportation of livestock from this country abroad. We do not believe that animals should be transported live from this country into the continent because of the conditions that they are suffering. That's Platform 1 policy. Platform 2 policy is that UKIP wishes to introduce a total compulsory non-stun process before any religious slaughter takes place. And at the moment, there was a survey done by the British Veterinary Association and the RSPCA, I believe, that about last year, about 80% of halal slaughterhouses were in fact stunning the animals before the ritual throat cutting. Unfortunately, I don't think that was the same situation with the kosher slaughterhouses. So really, it would appear that at the moment, the majority of halal slaughterhouses are in fact in line with UKIP policy. I understand that also last year they said there's about a 60% increase in non-stun slaughter in halal slaughterhouses as a result, I understand, of increasing conservatism with regard to religious procedures. Now, can I just please make this crystal clear to the listeners? This is nothing whatsoever to do with religion, and I'll explain why. In 2011, there was a Guardian article which stated that, in fact, a similar ritual slaughter of animals was taking place in a Christian church called St. George's in Libya, which is about some 20 miles outside Jerusalem. And this ritual slaughter was being performed by Catholics and Greek Orthodox people, and they worked out that about 70 to 80 lambs were slaughtered by various Christian faiths abroad. So it's not purely a focus on Islam, it's not purely a focus on Judaism. We accept it happens worldwide across a whole variety of religions. In fact, I understand there is Hindu religious slaughter in certain areas of India.
Yeah, before you go on, Lembit, one may ask, have we or did the British Veterinary Association and some of the animal welfare campaigners carried out an in-depth scientific research to ascertain the fact that if a surgical blade is used to slaughter animal non-stun, how would that affect the right of the animal, as they are so much concerned with the welfare of animals?
You'll find that in British politics, animal welfare has plenty of research behind it, but very little of it is taken seriously in Parliament. For example, in the fox hunting debate, where people were debating whether you could catch and kill foxes with hounds, the debate clearly proved, the evidence clearly proved that killing a fox with hounds was actually causing less suffering than the alternatives like shooting. And yet we still got the ban because of prejudice and because of this extraordinary obsession we have in terms of animal welfare. Turning to the point that we've been discussing tonight, I studied this quite a lot. I used to represent a rural constituency, and it seemed to me oftentimes the animals were less stressed whenever this ritual slaughter process took place. Oftentimes the animals were calm, and you can determine that from some of the chemicals which are in the blood if you analyse the animal after it's been killed. By contrast, abattoirs can be very stressful. The animals seem to know what's going on in some cases, and the whole production line way in which the animals are killed, in my view, introduces a stress and a distress which we seem to discount to zero, because that's the way we do it in the West. So what should happen? My judgment is we should introduce the concept of tolerable harm. This is a concept which isn't new. We recommended this for the case of fox hunting, to have a look at what's the best way to control foxes. It can equally well be applied to this question. If we decide that, obviously, if you kill an animal, that's harming the animal, you can't get away from that. But if we decide that there's a measure of tolerable harm, then we can decide what is acceptable in terms of a killing method and what is not. We have to get the data then. So in conclusion, the research is there. My opinion is that actually the ritual slaughter isn't necessarily worse than the alternatives, but this debate always ends up with people shouting their feelings rather than discussing the facts.
Mahmoud, BVA put out this series of documentary done where a slaughterhouse, an operative in a slaughterhouse hacked and sawn the throat of an animal, which they think is very bad. It was very bad, and it was causing a lot of stress to the animal. You being a Muslim that believe in halal, do you practice such slaughter by hacking and sewing the throat of an animal before?
Good evening, Adam, and thank you for having me on the radio. It's, as you say, I'm Muslim, so I'm a little bit more, I've looked into this issue. There was a very popular radio station that had a phone in along this, and it was amazing how many non-Muslim, the Jewish people actually found to say that they actually ate halal meat as well. And there is a reason behind it, you see. And also, I'm from engineering background. When animals killed with a large electrocution, what happens? A probe is put into the head. A large shot goes in the head and actually boils the liquid in the head and boils the brain, and is killed in that way. And halal and kosher is not just about killing off the animal. It goes far more than that. Elizabeth touched on briefly on transportation. It's about how the animal was grown, how it was kept, how it's transported, its welfare should all be taken into consideration, and the knife use must be clean, sharp, and with a single stroke it should be cut. So the welfare of the animal is taken quite into consideration, and that's what makes it. Now, why is it important that we should drain the blood? I'll tell you why. 80% of all disease, whether it's human being or animal, is carried within the blood. So when you drain the blood out, you actually take away a lot of the disease. What happens with stunning is as a shock wave, and the nervous system within the brain, the nervous system within the body of the animal actually bursts, and all the chemicals are leaked into the blood. And so a lot of the blood is actually then congealed and becomes solid within it. So if you look at quite often a chicken ring, you open it up, you'll see there's blood so stuck in it. That's not halal. If you open, say, a kosher or a halal chicken and properly done.
Some animals are bruised, and for that matter, the part that is bruised would retain some blood. You cannot run away from that fact.
No, so this is why it's the way they transport it. The animals are bruised. This is why it also looks into the welfare of the animal as well. That it's not bruised. For example, you can't halal a sick animal.
Elizabeth, yes, within 2 or 3 weeks or a month, BVA report and the polls that over 114,000 people signed e-petition to the House of Commons, and within 2 days or a day, the Jewish community and the Muslims community, those who are in favor of non-stand, 2 days they had over 50,000. So if they were to go in a week's time, they will get about 1 million. So which of them do you think is preferable in this country, if we can go by the polls?
The path of rationality and science, which would be the recommendations of the British Veterinary Association.
And which is it?
The British Veterinary Association recommend that there should be, the animal should be stunned before the ritual slaughter. And in fact, throughout Europe, that is the law now. It's in fact the law in Norway, Iceland, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Denmark. It was the law in Poland. Poland did ban non-stun ritual killing in 2013, but they lost out on about €500 million worth of meat exports to Turkey, Iran, and to Israel. So they've somewhat reneged on that because they lost all that trade then to Lithuania. However, Mahmoud was stating about the quality of live care and about the transportation of the animal. I presume, I don't know if Poland would necessarily have cooperated on all those levels. However, Poland was making a huge amount of money out of selling halal.
But majority of meat consumers would tell you that we prefer halal or kosher because it's most healthier than the other one.
No one's disputing that, Adam. Well, the issue is whether the animal should be stunned before its throat slit. That's the sole issue. And UKIP, the British Veterinary Association, the RSPCA, and the Food Standards Agency, who all agree and state that there should be a law whereby the animal will be stunned. It won't be killed, because we understand that an animal cannot be damaged, because if it is damaged, it will be non-halal, but it just has to be stunned so it doesn't suffer any
But
pain.
within 2 seconds, we're going to stop the blood flow of the animal. So how can we drain all the blood?
You won't stop the animal suffering. If you read the British Veterinary Association's report, it makes it quite clear about the pain and the absolute terror that these animals suffer and it can take up to, I understand, about 4 to 5 minutes for a cow to be killed in this manner. There's no need for it. All you have to do is stun the animal. You don't have to kill the animal, just stun the animal and then perform the ritual slaughter. It's already law in many European countries. It doesn't cause anyone any issue. It may cause some of the more conservative elements of Muslims to not support it. It may cause some of the Jewish community not to support it. But on the whole, I think that, as I said earlier, about 80% of halal killings are pre-stunning.
Is it because of the statistics? The polls are high now. That's why UKIP is jumping on the bandwagon to say that we would weave a very good legislation when it comes to our manifesto. That this is what we're going to do in our manifesto to satisfy those who are following the non-stun.
No, I don't think we're jumping on any bandwagon, because we have already said that it will be UKIP policy to ban live export of animals. So we do already have a series of platform policies.
But as you and I know that British doesn't export much of animal, we rather import most of our meat consumption into the United Kingdom.
Well, we wouldn't want to. We don't even want to import live animals into the, because the absolutely appalling journeys that many of these animals suffer.
Yeah, I'm actually inclined to agree with Elizabeth on this one and UKIP, and the reason is because I think probably stunned halal killing is causing less suffering than abattoirs. I just have that view. The animal can be very calm before it's stunned and then it's killed. Also, I have to say, I take the British Veterinary Association quite seriously. I don't take the RSPCA seriously. They acted in a ludicrous way over fox hunting and ignored the evidence. So I discount what the RSPCA is, and for me, I don't find their evidence credible from past experience. But the British Veterinary Association has no reason to play a political card here. And if they do say that stunning followed by halal makes sense, I'd be inclined to trust them on that. Elizabeth has put forward a fairly credible case. And from a religious point of view, as I understand it, and others can correct me, Mahmoud can correct me if this is wrong, there isn't any compromise in terms of the ritual nature of the killing if you stun the animal first. So if indeed the stunning takes away the suffering, or the overwhelming part of the suffering for the animal, perhaps that's a sensible solution.
In Islam, it is said that the animal should be healthy, the animal should be alive, the animal shouldn't die before the throat is slit. You slaughter it. So if you stun the animal and it becomes unconscious, that means the animal is gone, it's passed.
Well, that's almost a theological debate. And as I say, I don't pretend to be an expert on the religious side of it or the technical side. But I'm interested to know what people think about that. Bear in mind, as Mahmoud has said, there is a very strong health reason why this ritual is included in religious text, in the same way that there are other pieces of advice in the Bible and in Jewish teaching which are really about health. So in that sense it kind of makes sense, but also religion has to evolve. Not everything is to be taken literally. And I would say, it's not for me to do this, but Islam needs to have a conversation, and the Jewish faith needs to have a conversation with itself and say, in the 21st century, what's the right compromise between animal welfare and religious edict?
Well, you're still tuning to Voice of Africa Radio, 27 minutes after 7 o'clock on Voice of Africa Radio. Today I have Lembit, Opik, Elizabeth The Rock Jones, Dartford parliamentary candidate for UKIP. Yesterday's revelation on the TV wasn't good for UKIP. I hope you people will do a very wonderful job to clear the sentiment of UKIP, once again the bigot in the society. Mahmoud, we will be doing away with the slaughtering of animal, and we will go straight to Libya. In 2011, a lot of debate, unhealthy debate about how to get rid of Muammar Gaddafi. When we got rid of Muammar Gaddafi, it was captured that Mrs. Clinton was so excited. We went there, we saw him, and we killed him. A lot of politicians were so happy. Those whose feeling or those whose interest was upheld by their dubious way of getting rid of regimes, leaders, all over the world. Now Libya is next to nothing. Second, Somalia. We've seen the first time in the history of Libya, 3 over 21 Christians were slaughtered like goats. And they've promised to make the Mediterranean Sea soiled with the blood of the Christians. A country that hosted most Christians, and Muslims were living side by side. Mahmoud, do you think William Hague, David Cameron, Sarkozy, Mrs. Clinton and Obama should be held responsible for the 21 people killed in Libya?
Well, I think it's not just for me to say this, it's for the British electorate to say, and I'm glad to say we have a good democracy and we can vote and bring about change and vote people out who do this. Let me just go back for, this is not the first time. Let's not forget the war in Iraq, where many of the young people of this country went to fight a war and died, and then it was unjustified war. There, they were jumping up and down about Saddam Hussein. And then when Saddam, it's not what you have, it's what you replace it with. What did we replace Iraq with? Absolute chaos. Afghanistan, absolute chaos. And Libya now, absolute chaos. So it's not what you got, it's what you're going to replace it with. Unless there's a system in place, a true democracy which reflects people, then I think really everything we've done in these 3 countries has been wrong. We should never interfere in other countries' politics. I think we should organically let the country sort of develop and bring about democracy that way, rather than think that we
Elizabeth, with Libya, we had the support of the UN with the resolution 1973, I think, the resolution that gave the mandate to the NATO to go and protect and defend life in Libya. And now we've got ingrown or homegrown terrorists in Libya who are doing this, and we are linking it to ISIL. That ISIL is there doing that. So what is the political implications of some of these crimes?
Well, I think that David Cameron has really got a brass neck when he said the other week that he thought that the bombing of Libya, which I think was March 2011 to October 2011, was the right thing to do. No, it certainly was not the right thing to do. We should never have been involved in any way, shape or form. Britain should not have any association or be tarred with any form of responsibility for what's happened. And you know how much it cost?
Britain sponsored the bill in the UN. We sponsored the bill.
We shouldn't have done that, obviously. We shouldn't have got involved. We should have learned from Iraq. Now, the taxpayers paid heavily for this. The bill for bombing bombing Libya is still not crystal clear. We can't get the stats anywhere, but from March 2011 to August 2011, the known costs were £950 million. So imagine £950 million poured perhaps back into our dear NHS, instead of which it was used to bomb Libya into the Stone Age. I'm not saying the British forces were the main protagonists there, but they did assist. And what help has that been to Britain? Do we have a major a commercial interest there? Do we have a major diplomatic interest there? Whereas it was one of Italy's colonies. Yeah. One of Italy's oil companies now has got a very good contract there. I think it's NENI. Furthermore, Libya is China's 5th largest African economy with which it does trade. So China's benefited hugely, Italy's benefited hugely. What's happened? Our diplomatic service has had to leave Tripoli and is now operating long distance in Tunisia because of the situation is so unstable. An absolutely catastrophic foreign policy, yet another one. Ridiculous.
Well, Lembit, the whole history of our foreign policies, right from Tony Blair to Mr. Cameron, an association with other leaders like Obama and the former French president to go and bomb Libya. Did we consider the consequences after getting rid of Muammar Gaddafi before we started our campaign?
Yes, we did, but we considered the consequences in a way which didn't really consider the future properly. What Tony Blair did in Iraq was kind of convince himself that there were weapons of mass destruction, and he tried to prove the future without having the evidence. That's what we did in Libya. We we pictured this idealistic Arab Spring where you get rid of the bad guys and have friendly Western governments instead who'll give us the oil and who'll have nice democracies, well, for cheap anyway, maybe not for free but for cheap. And then we went in and bombed the place, like Elizabeth says. Well, I'm not surprised it's all gone wrong, because it was an amazingly naive and uninformed and frankly superficial analysis. I work quite a lot with, for example, some Middle Eastern channels, and it's perfectly obvious that we're still doing it. For example, with ISIL, the big enemy, number one enemy of the West, we were involved in arming it and training it, as far as I can understand it, because we thought they would get rid of bad President Assad. Now I saw a week or 2 weeks ago an interview with President Assad on a British television channel. So maybe we're becoming friends with him again, because ISIL that we helped to create is worse than President Assad. It's so insane that we think that we can bomb the countries that we're interested in into peace. When you bomb countries, but you create war and resentment.
Who would argue that those ISIL, the so-called ISIL supporters in Libya, who killed over 21 Coptic Christians from Egypt, had their weapon from the Western world, because we flooded Libya with weapons to fight Muammar Gaddafi? So wouldn't it be some of the weapons that we gave them?
Quite possibly.
They're now using it on us.
I'm agreeing with your question. I think you have a unanimous panel tonight on this one, because it's. I was making programs about this a year ago, 18 months ago, I think, saying if we back the Libyan rebels, we're actually backing the same people we're fighting in Afghanistan. If we're training the rebels, the moderate rebels, as some people call them, then actually we're supporting people who are our enemy in other parts of the world. Now, I've said for a long time, and I'm one of the very few voices that says this, if we want to sort out ISIL, we have to talk to them. You may not like the idea of it. It may seem like a terrible concept to talk to such a violent grouping, but we're not going to bomb them out of existence, because every time we go and bomb civilian areas, there's collateral damage. In other words, civilians get killed, and then they hate us even more. That's one reason it's been such a total disaster, no-win situation in Afghanistan. Very soon, Afghanistan will be just as it was before, because we didn't have an exit strategy, and we didn't make any serious investment in Afghanistan many years ago, when we actually trained the beginning of Al-Qaeda, the Mujahideen, to fight the Russians. So, as Mahmoud said as well, we just repeat the same problem again and again and again. And where we're going to end up? Instability. It's only good fortune that the West has more guns than the Middle East. Imagine if these countries took the same attitude towards Britain. They'd say, well, we don't really like what Britain's doing, so we're going to sponsor a revolution. Here's some guns, we'll train you, good luck, go down to Westminster. And that's what we've done. It just looks different because we see it through a British media filter.
Well, Elizabeth, some linguistic experts in the United States of America and some film experts have seen the video, they've criticized it, and they've said some of the footages were wrong and some of them were fake. They don't believe it's not authentic, that they believe those killings were done on the Mediterranean Sea in Libya. And some were saying that Jihadi James, the one leading the killing, is speaking like American. And the question is, people are asking that, is he an American trained who is in Libya doing this kind of
I don't think that's the case. If you follow the life and times of Jihadi John on Twitter, there is a photograph going around on Twitter that shows that he's dead. But I've never seen Jihadi John. All we've seen is that mount of him. So, but they think he's dead. Now, the man who actually was speaking during the course of the slaughter did not have a British accent. He did not have an American accent.
But linguistics expert in America are saying that he's got an American accent.
No, he doesn't have an American accent. He has a Soviet English accent. He's obviously from the Soviet republics and has learned English via the Soviet system, which is often Americanized English. So he could well be a Chechen. We just don't know. I don't think he's British. He's a completely different shape, build, look from the Jihadi John character. I'm sure that the killings are authentic, and I'm confident that they did happen where they said they did happen. But what I find very amusing, well, insofar as we can use amusement in a situation like this, is the American regime reaction. We have the Navy Rear Admiral John Kirby complaining that Egypt shouldn't have dared to go on and bomb Islamic State, and certainly shouldn't have done it without telling the Americans first, and that Egypt shouldn't ever use violence against Islamic State, and we should negotiate and install proper governmental practices with Islamic State, which I thought was extraordinarily patronising toward Egypt. Let us not forget that Egypt has suffered some very serious terrorism, and Libya obviously so close to Egypt. Of course, Egypt needs to take action to protect itself.
Now, from what the American experts and Navy is saying,
yes,
the press is also dancing the same tune, that if it comes that the video footage was tampered with, then that would embarrass Al-Sisi's government, that they've killed some people who are not ISIL but are also terrorist organizations in Libya.
I don't think it's been tampered with. I really don't think it's been tampered with.
That is what the American media has started now. It's another campaign to justify whatever they want to do to support their government of it's not ISIL and we have to negotiate with ISIL in Libya. We have to negotiate with ISIL in Libya and kill ISIL in Syria.
But who's the real winner out in all of this? Who do you think's the real winner? Who saw an opportunity and got in there fast? Putin. Who came over, had a lovely meeting with El-Sisi, had a lovely evening at the opera, and had a lot of talks, and a lot of arms deals took place. He saw an opportunity, came straight over, didn't he?
He's a clever man.
Well, I would go further than that. I actually think when people go, oh, Putin, don't say anything positive about him, he's actually really popular in Russia. He has given Russia a lot of pride. He's looking like he's kind of winning the war in the Ukraine in a messy sort of way, and he knows how to play the West. Now, if people just want to say, oh, Putin's bad, Putin's selfish, Putin's an egotist, whether or not those things are true, let's look at the facts. He's playing a great game, and as Elizabeth says, he plays pretty smart business games as well. So I would counsel people to get out of this Western bubble, which makes us misunderstand what's going on in Syria, makes us misunderstand where ISIL came from, which makes us misunderstand how we've messed up in Libya, and I think that Mahmoud and Elizabeth have given an accurate account of what really happened there, and makes us misunderstand Putin. If you underestimate your competition, you're much more likely to lose, and that's what we're doing.
Well, Mahmoud, right after October 2011, when Muammar Gaddafi was killed in a brutal coup d'etat in Libya, those who killed him immediately proceeded to Niger and went to Mali to go and defend the interest of the Tuareg against the French. The biggest uranium mining is in Mali, where they are taking the uranium without looking after the people of the Tuareg. Therefore, the weapon that the West gave to them, they went there to defend their own in Tuareg. Are we doing the right thing as we're getting rid of tough leadership who are putting caps on some terrorist organizations, just like what Muammar Gaddafi did?
Oh, I mean, I was not a fan of Muammar Gaddafi, but as you say, there were some benefits, and I mean, I'd much rather see a organically homegrown democracy that would develop from there. You mentioned people of Tuareg who are actually fighting independence. The reason is that they're not being looked after. Their country's being pillaged. The country's making lots of money, but they're getting very little for it. As soon as France's uranium was under threat, France went in there to look after interests. So with all of these wars, there's an underlying message that money talks and large corporations talk. And out of all of this conflict, the only people benefiting are the arms suppliers.
Well, Elizabeth,
yes,
Muammar Gaddafi also stated that he would, after he's no more, Europe will be flooded. And today we are saying in Italy, the media is saying that ISIL has promised to send over 500,000 migrants into Europe.
Well, I think this is entirely predictable, and it would be a very intelligent military strategy for Islamic State to pursue, of course. What with the current very liberal and porous borders approach of the EU, we will have to accept, well, Britain may not, but of course Italy will have to accept them, work out whether they are deserving of asylum, and then of course they will disperse throughout the whole of Europe. Yes, I'm sure, a very, very intelligent strategy. What do we do about it? Well, when we get the boats coming over, we have to give them safe passage and return them from whence they came, so they do not enter Europe. And looking at the most recent raft of travellers coming in from Libya, again, all looked like young, fit men, no women, no children, which would give me a considerable cause for concern as to exactly who they are and why they want to come over to Europe.
ISIL is saying that he's going to join in the migrants who will be coming to Europe, and
exactly.
they will come and
that's inevitable.
Claim Rome.
That is inevitable. Well, going back to 1480, the Battle of Otranto, when the Ottoman Empire tried to take over Rome last time, but failed because 800 men stood their ground but were beheaded for not converting over to Islam. But they stood their ground, and because they stood their ground for a 2-week siege, the Roman army managed to organise and protect. So we have to give great thanks to the great courage of the people of the past. Another way forward could be walls. Indeed, Egypt and Israel have a massive wall, which I understand has kept out a number of undesirables. Egypt and Gaza has a massive wall, again, which keeps out a significant number of undesirables.
Do you believe in that artificial walls that has been created in Gaza?
It seems to work. Also, there's a massive
seizing
wall.
of people's land to stealing of people's land.
There's a massive wall. There's a massive wall between Greece now and Turkey, and that has reduced the illegal immigrant land travel from about 100,000 per annum down to about 90. So these things do work. We may have to have install more walls.
Are you predicting that Britain should have a wall, artificial wall, to prevent migrants from coming into
We're an island.
Britain?
We're an island. We didn't need an artificial
Our borders can be fortress so that they cannot come into Britain. Even though we went to their country and bombed them, they need to get a refuge.
Just because David Cameron, for a period of months, went to bomb Libya, gives absolutely no excuse whatsoever for Islamic State to come over here.
They need to seek sanctuary. They need to come and have
engage in killing civilians and engage in blowing up shopping centres.
Imagine you being in Libya, working as a Libyan, earning a good living, having free home, free medical care, free education. If you are getting married, you get paid. If you are a farmer, you get seed and equipment to farm. And Libya comes here and bomb you. Wouldn't you go to Libya and seek greener pasture?
I don't think I would. What on earth? What would be the... Well, greener pasture maybe, but I certainly wouldn't want to be reaping revenge. What's the point?
I've lived through this. Well, I lived through this in Northern Ireland. In Northern Ireland, the Republican, the Catholic community, nationalist community was clearly oppressed. I don't come from that community, but it were clearly oppressed by unionist policy. It's undeniable. I was Shadow Secretary of State for 10 years, and I could see it. I met the people who were former terrorists, and I was very persuaded that they had a case. Now, what's interesting is those terrorists now, reformed as politicians, they don't justify what they did back then. They don't justify the killing, but they can explain it. Now, we're in the same situation when it comes to Libya, ISIL, everybody else. One day, they won't justify what they're doing, but they can explain it, because when you're fighting a big state, then this subversive activity of a small group can be hugely damaging. Now, the big problem for us, Elizabeth, is that we have created hate there, as we have in Afghanistan, where we've killed, say, 70 people by a bombing raid was accidentally wiped out a wedding, for example. Imagine if that happened here. Imagine if an Afghanistan aircraft from the Afghanistan Air Force or Al-Qaeda Air Force, whatever, if it existed, bombed 70 people to death somewhere in Britain. That would be absolute outrage. Look at the difference in the coverage between the deaths, tragic as they were in France, compared to the hundreds of thousands, and some would say 1.5 million civilians who have died as a result of collateral damage in Afghanistan and Iraq because of our actions. It's asymmetrical as war, it's asymmetrical as reporting. And this is where the hate's coming from. And this is what motivates people to do the wrong thing.
Becoming an economic migrant, just like the whole entire economy of Libya is now, it has collapsed. They don't have anything to feed on. Wouldn't we, Britain and France, accept these migrants, seeing as we caused their problems?
Well, we didn't cause their problems.
Who caused it?
Their problems predate Western intervention for many, many, many years. If we look back to Saddam Hussein...
Let's look at the current one. Let's look at the current situation in Libya now.
Yeah, okay, but there's a significant amount of discord and chaos occurring in these countries long before any Western intervention. I'm not justifying the Western intervention. I'm totally opposed to it. Indeed, UKIP is a non-interventionist party. We do not believe in militarism. We believe in trade. We believe in education. So
what should we do to resuscitate the economy of the Libyan people, seeing as now there isn't any security?
We don't really need
government
to... I frankly think, Adam, we don't really need to do anything. It's a former Italian colony. An Italian oil company's already got a massive contract.
The Italians did not sponsor the bill in the UN Security Council to go and bomb
militarism. They were involved in militarism, in military action against
But they were not trumpeting it to kill Gaddafi.
But they're the ones who are economically benefiting. Eni has a lovely big fat contract now with Libya. Furthermore, China's got a lovely big fat contract with... What's China doing? Let's ask. What is China doing to resuscitate Libya?
China has got more people that they want to send abroad than receiving them. So if you want to go to China and work, you are welcome. They will accept you.
China can sort it out. China's getting a huge amount of benefit from being in Libya. We are not. China has the infrastructure and the wealth to resolve issues in Libya, and I'm sure that China could install good governance and good trade. So China, now's your time.
I'm very keen to hear what Mahmoud thinks about this, because myself and Elizabeth are hogging the show this evening.
No, it's very interesting. Carry on.
The great thing is it's a competition of generosity. We're here so often, I suppose it evens out.
I think we're good friends.
I've already recognised Putin's great strength as a Russian leader. I also think that we need to recognise China's incredibly effective strategic planning. They've got a huge economy, and it's growing so strongly. They are I think the second largest economy in the world at the moment.
And they are now building their economies outside China.
Yeah, and they're buying up Africa. It's really clever move.
United States of America, Mexico, Brazil.
That's right.
In the England, Docklands. They've bought everything in East London.
There are some problems. For example, I'm dealing with a case at the moment. A man who flies aerobatic planes, and the planes were damaged, and there was an insurance case, and it hasn't been paid out by the Chinese insurers, and that's messy. So there are still some things that are going wrong, but we'll fix those. And China, with its enormous population, its strategy and its semi-command economy, there is some private enterprise there. They're playing a really good game. Now, when you look at it again with places like Libya, Elizabeth said it's not really our fault. Well, I think it was, because Gaddafi was our enemy for a while, then he became our friend, then we saw a chance of getting rid of him, so he became our enemy again. Like Saddam Hussein, who came to the UK and had a royal reception. We backed Saddam Hussein in the Iran-Iraq war. What was that about?
And we use it as we use those Saddam Hussein gas to death as one of our point of getting rid of him, because he kills his own people.
And yet we were his friend. He was our friend for a while. So it kind of underlines what's been said here, and I think I agree with both Mahmoud and also Elizabeth on this. We make up foreign policy on the basis of what suits British interests, and in the end, because it's not driven by morality but driven by power and expedience, it comes back to bite us.
Well, this brings to mind, before Mahmoud you talk, we don't have much time. The bishops are saying that Church of England, people of the church, should come out and vote. Should we ask, is voting a moral right? Is voting a right that everyone must observe in this country? And if so, we voted several times for leadership in England. Did they fulfill our aspiration of we investing our right in them to lead us?
Well, I mean, yes, we should vote in this country. It is morally right. I'm not going to go into the theologies of religion because obviously that's another chapter. But, you know, voting affects everything we do. Our NHS, our education, our transport, our taxation.
But I didn't vote Cameron to go to Libya, did I?
No, you didn't. And this is why sometimes people did not vote for Tony Blair to go into Iraq. And this is why now Tony Blair, some people are asking for him even to be prosecuted for war crimes. I think we have a democracy in this country. We may not agree with everything.
What is democracy?
But what it does, it gives us the opportunity to have a say. And the more people put a cross in the right place, and obviously we know what the right place is, Liberal Democrat, of course.
Well, Elizabeth.
Yes, darling.
Yes, now the letter, the 50-page letter of by the bishops in England, some see it as leftist and in support of Labour, and others see it as an objective and their right to speak when it comes to politics. How do you see the morality, the moral of voting in the United Kingdom?
We have a right to vote in this country, and luckily it's not a duty. We're very lucky that we don't have compulsory voting, and UKIP is opposed to compulsory voting. There is compulsory voting in Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Cyprus, Ecuador, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg and Peru, and also Uruguay. We don't have that here, and I'm very grateful that we don't, because I think that the very fact that we've had such low turnout from Margaret Thatcher to John Major down to Tony Blair, at each general election the proportion of voting becomes lower and lower and lower, and I think this is an absolute sign that Labour and Conservative are so similar now. What's the point in voting? You vote Conservative, you're going to get Labour. You vote Labour, it's going to be Conservative. There's such a consensus now.
You vote Conservative, you get bankers stealing off your money to helping people to save.
Vote Labour, you're going to get the ship bombed out of Iran.
Right. I'm just going to add to what Elizabeth says. if I could just nick Lembit's minutes, I'm going to agree with what Elizabeth said. Elizabeth actually did make a point, because when Tony Blair got elected, and all the time, he never called up once a Labour leader to the number 10. It was Margaret Thatcher he called up. And when Margaret Thatcher was asked what's her great legacy, she said Tony Blair. So you can see where Elizabeth's coming from, and a good valid point that you get vote Tory, you still get Labour, you still get vote. The two parties are so linked.
The House of Bishop made reference to two administrations, 1945 and 1979, referring to Labour in 45 and Margaret Thatcher's administration in 1979, that it did change. It had a little bit change in the voting, in the lives of the people of the country. But now we don't have it. We don't have they spoke of the nuclear deterrent, the trident, they spoke of the banking, they spoke of the economy, and on and on and on we go. Don't you think that some of the things or decisions that our politicians make is making people naturally disenfranchising themselves when it comes to elections and voting in this country?
Yes, but as Elizabeth has said, I am very against compulsion. You've got the right to vote. You've actually got the right not to vote as well. I would simply say if you don't vote, you've actually got no right to complain either. The people I have no respect for are the ones who say, oh, you're all the same, I didn't vote, and it's a rubbish government. Okay, we might all be the same, and you didn't vote, but don't really care about your view about the government because you had no part in deciding who it was. So if you don't take your democratic responsibility seriously and vote, then you actually lose your right to be taken seriously as a person. In terms of what you've said about Labour and Conservative being similar, and some people say the Lib Dems as well, I think one reason UKIP's doing quite well is because they do look quite different. But on the other hand, there aren't many radical governments. We're talking about 1945 and 1979. Well, that's 34 years apart. So most governments are steady as she goes. You don't get revolution every 5 years. But this next election is interesting because it's not at all clear that any one party will have enough seats to govern, so we could have a second coalition. And this one could be even more complex because it could have
SNPs.
It could have SNP, it could have Lib Dems, it could have UKIP in it. That would be interesting, a rainbow coalition, and that will make living near Westminster a lot of fun because I'll be able to see the fireworks from my roof.
Well, you thought you need to Voice of Africa Radio. Before we go, Elizabeth.
Yes, about compulsory voting or not. Well, we are opposed to compulsory voting because we are largely a libertarian party. And it could be said, the arguments, of course, for compulsory voting are that it gives a higher degree of legitimacy to the political regime that is voted in, because obviously everyone has to vote. About 92% people vote, I think, in Australia. Also, there's less of a need with compulsory voting for political parties to have massive donations. They don't need to draw so much on finance because people are compelled to turn up and people are compelled to pick someone to vote from. So there are pluses and minuses, but I don't believe in compulsion in this situation.
Mahmoud, people in Ghana are more aware of their political environment than people in England. Why should we have such an educated nation, but people within it are less politically aware of what is happening in England as far as politics
there's
is
an old
concerned?
saying that a full stomach never fights a war. And that's what it is. We have basically public. We got jobs in the main. We got reasonable income. We know we'll have a house. We know we'll have a job. And I think that's what it is. The electorate has become lazy. And I agree with Lembit Opik about people saying, "Well, we got rubbish come." Well, the reason you got rubbish come because you don't vote. Go out and vote. Vote for what you think is right. And we all know who's right.
Well, I thank you all very much for your time on Voice of Africa Radio.
It's a high point of my week. Every week.
Yes, and don't forget, ladies out there, you only had the vote in 1929. So
yes.
use it.
News at 8 next on Voice of Africa Radio. Catch us same time next week on Insight between 7 and 8 on Voice of Africa Radio. In the studio has been Lembit Opik, former Liberal Democrat MP, Elizabeth De Rock Jones, Dartford constituency. Hope she wins and becomes next Margaret Thatcher and Mahmoud Fiaz. Stay tuned and join us.
Thanks.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Rebecca Foster. Officials in France have seized the passports of 6 citizens who were allegedly trying to travel to Syria to join the Islamic State. The confiscated passports are out of use for at least 6 months, and Prime Minister Manuel Valls says he expects more seizures to come. In a previous statement, the Prime Minister said some 1,400 people in France have joined the Islamic State or intend to in the future. The Palestinian Authority and the PLO, or Palestine Liberation Organization, face fines of more than $600 million after a jury in New York found them liable for terror attacks in Israel in which Americans were killed or injured. The jury's award could be financially crippling for the Palestinians, as our U.S. correspondent Simon Marks reports.
The decision ends a 10-year legal battle waged by American victims of the 6 attacks which took place in Israel between 2002 and 2004. The jury delivered a massive victory to the victims' families and a stunning blow to the Palestinian Authority and the PLO. Their liability carries a penalty of $218 million in damages that's automatically tripled under the terrorism law under which the case was brought. Despite denials by top Palestinian officials, the court heard evidence that Palestinian Authority employees were involved in planning, financing and carrying out the attacks.
Greece is set to submit a list of reform measures to be approved by the European Union before Eurozone finance ministers can agree to extend its bailout program. Athens is under pressure to agree to some austerity conditions in exchange for 4 months of extra time to negotiate another rescue package, despite Greece's new government's opposition to more spending cuts. The new U.S. Defense Secretary is holding a 6-hour meeting in Kuwait to discuss the strategy to deal with the Islamic State. Ashton Carter says he wants to better understand the Obama administration's approach to a very complicated problem. From Washington, Daniel Wrenches reports.
The top U.S. generals and diplomats attending this marathon strategy session have been told not to bring pre-prepared presentations and to talk off the cuff. Defense Secretary Carter says he's not planning any immediate changes, only to understand the strategy. The Obama administration is coming under pressure mainly from Republicans who argue that the approach is too limited, as concerns are raised about the spread of the Islamic State beyond Iraq and Syria.
Top-level nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iran have resumed in Geneva amid mounting criticism of the Obama administration's tactics. An initial deal is meant to be hammered out by a March 31st deadline, with negotiators from both sides, including U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, trying to reconcile the gulf between them. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN. President Obama says the U.S. can't afford to play politics with national security. Speaking at the White House, the president put more pressure on Congress to resolve the dispute over funding for the Department of Homeland Security, which is due to run out by the end of the week. Mr. Obama said jobs and the safety of the American people were on the line.
Unless Congress acts, 1 week from now, more than 100,000 DHS employees, Border Patrol, port inspectors, TSA agents will show up to work without getting paid. These are folks who, if they don't have a paycheck, are not going to be able to spend that money in your states. It will have a direct impact on your economy, and it will have a direct impact on America's national security.
And as he accepted the Academy Award for Best Director, Mexican Alejandro González Iñárritu used the spotlight to call for better treatment of immigrants in the United States. Last night, his film Birdman won Best Picture, as well as Best Original Screenplay, Cinematography, and Director. Andrea Arenas reports.
Birdman's mastermind Alejandro González Iñárritu first joked about the frequency in which Latino artists are winning awards at the Oscars, referring to fellow Mexican Alfonso Cuarón's win last year for directing the film Gravity. Mr. Iñárritu dedicated his award to Mexico and to Mexican immigrants in the United States.
And the ones that live in this country who are part of the latest generation of immigrants in this country, I just pray that they can be treated with the same dignity and respect of the ones who came before and built this incredible immigrant nation.
His comment comes at a time when the Obama administration is struggling to pass a program to allow some immigrants who came to the country illegally to get deferrals from deportation as well as work permits.
And that's the latest from Feature Story News. Rebecca Foster reporting.
There's only one voice for our community. The voice of Africa Radio with Afrobeats on 94 FM.
Starline Limited provides a fast, safe, efficient door-to-door shipping and freight service. We provide a safe and secure service all the way to Ghana, Nigeria, Abidjan, and many other West African countries. From containers to barrels, we take care of all your needs. We also offer a money transfer service which guarantees your money can be received within minutes. So why not give us a call today so we can provide our Starline service, shipping, freight and money transfer. Call us now on 07957 672 864. That's 07957 672 864. Starline, we'll get it there.
Fun Africa Mobile, you good talker! Back with improved services and more talking options. Omono Sabia, the new Phone Africa Mobile Super SIM is loaded to make your mobile life easier anywhere you are. This is big! Yes, you make roaming calls at the local rate of the country you are visiting.
This is not better living.
Listen up, y'all.